Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I want to take a look at planetary weather in Star Citizen, how it currently works and how it could be improved. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the Armory. A few years ago, the first implementation of weather was introduced to Star Citizen, and it has mostly remained functionally and visually unchanged, except for the addition of volumetric clouds to some planets. In the current implementation, all planets have various temperature ranges based on location and time of day, and there's also an implementation of wind and rain. Functionally, the temperature can change between day and night, and there is a storm state which will have rain, low visibility, low temperatures, and strong winds. And that's pretty much the main issue of the current weather system. Every location in the verse only has two possible weather states: clear skies or catastrophic storm. Some of you might remember the few patches where the wind on Hurston would knock over ships. Now, in real life, weather prediction and simulation is quite difficult, mostly because of all the variables at play and different physics going on. But for a game, we actually don't need any of that. Because we're building a world rather than trying to simulate an existing one, we can decide what weather states we want and then work back to how to create them. But first we have to discuss some mechanical requirements for a planet to have weather, which are actually pretty simple in this case. To have weather, you most likely need an atmosphere. Planets that don't have one would require a different approach to creating environmental hazards, because that's what weather is in the context of Star Citizen. Now, various planets can have different structures and compositions of the atmosphere, which manifests itself to the player as a pressure, whether the atmosphere is breathable or maybe hazardous to people and equipment, and whether it protects the planet from hazards that come from space. So, for example, you might have a planet like Hurston which more or less supports human life. Or you could have a planet like Pyro 1 which is extremely inhospitable. And that actually serves as the first pillar of creating weather in Star Citizen. It gives you the base state of the planet from which you can start building out weather states. Now, we can actually only focus on the parts of weather that are visible to the player or otherwise affect them. We can actually narrow it down to temperature, wind, and precipitation or rainfall. So for every planet you could define the temperature range, wind speeds, and rainfall or other visibility conditions like fog. Then you have to create some relationships between these values to define the possible weather states. Now, at this point in time, these can be pretty loose, but we will get to the mechanics later. For example, a nice day on Microtech is clear skies, higher than average temperatures, no or little wind, and no rainfall. Now, from real life, we know that different locations tend to have different weather patterns, so you could segment planets based on distance from the equator and define different temperature ranges, wind speed, and so on. We also know that different biomes have different weather patterns. So for example, let's say that you have a planet that has a forest biome and a steppe biome at the same latitude. The forest biome might have a higher probability of rain and generally wet weather, while the steppe might be more dry and windy. Also, more arid or icy planets will tend to have snow or dust storms hindering visibility. On the other hand, a planet with a lot of water might have a lot of fog. Obviously, different planet types might have different relationships between weather patterns, but this approach allows you to map weather patterns onto a planet and create a base set of weather from which the next step can be drawn. And finally, we have to look into how to move between the weather states. In real life, this is a gradual change, and we can actually reproduce this in game too. But not every kind of weather can turn into any other kind of weather, so we have to define some kind of a weather progression. For example, if a storm is coming on a sunny day, it usually doesn't come out of nowhere. First the clouds roll in, then the wind, and then the light rain before the full storm begins. Now, since we're talking about the entire universe, it is entirely possible for there to be a planet that goes from a beautiful day to a hurricane within minutes. And that's another way you can balance weather and environmental hazards. And after you define which weather states can transition to which other weather states, you are pretty much almost done with the system design. Now you have to go back to the probability of each weather state that we defined earlier. And based on this, you can define the probability of which state the current state will transition into when it's time for a weather change. This would solve the main issue with the current system, rapid transition between two extreme states. Now, there are a few more things. Star Citizen has great cloud tech, so it would be a shame not to use it. One possible use would be fog and other visibility conditions near the ground. But you also have to think of clouds as the origin of rain or the equivalent of rain on a given planet. Right now, clouds are simply there. They move on a predefined pattern. But what if we had a way to create and destroy clouds as a part of the weather system? I believe that CIG are already working on some form of this, because not only it adds a layer of realism to the game, it also gives the players a way to predict the weather before they get hit by it. Imagine you're on the surface of a planet and you see some very dark clouds rolling in. That gives you an indication that you should wrap things up and leave if you're not prepared, which is actually way more immersive than trying to build a weather prediction system for every planet. And finally, the speed and frequency of weather transition is another way to balance the weather. More hazardous planets have faster and more frequent weather changes. This forces you to prepare for all options or to hunker down while the most severe weather passes. Now, how important is the weather system for Star Citizen? This is a debatable topic, and the answer right now is not really. The current implementation is good enough for now, but weather is definitely something CIG should revisit after Pyro comes out, as it adds a bit of depth and danger to locations. And Pyro has a very diverse set of planets which could create opportunities for interesting weather effects. I also think that more emphasis will be placed on environmental hazards found in space, as there's a bit more design freedom there. And with that being said, that's all for today. What do you think? Do we need a better weather system? What weather types would you like to see in the game? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.